There's an important space in the arts for working class people. To this day, we are fairly underrepresented. The arts world is yet to fully overcome its issues regarding the unglamorous of society. But what does this genre have to do with the community that it oscillates around? Tan skin and chipped teeth in country sunsets, bored children, outdated decor, green bottles, scraggly dogs, Americana trailer homes, a sense of right nationalism. You know the genre. It's not special. It pervades all art forms involving a camera, like photography, film, and video, and is always said to be made in a neutral and nostalgic light, not celebrating or disowning the trashy culture of Western poverty. Artists always say it's something along the lines of acknowledging their heritage, and in a sense, therefore, evoking nostalgia for nothing at all, or to help strengthen the community that they photographed. Just like Sandra Mickiewicz. Mickiewicz? 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 Anyway, her Happy Club, which inspired this video essay. But I think we would be naive to not question whether or not this is actually achieved, or if this entire genre is just film filtered ogling and othering. If the purpose of this genre is to remain neutral towards working class communities, to simply observe them for a lack of better words, then what does it say about how photographers typically interact with poor people? Observation is not how we typically describe human interaction. We use observation for non-human subjects, at least in English. If photographers and videographers have found a profitable niche in the observation of people during hardship, then the said photographers and videographers don't see the poor as people. To them, they would be a product, a profitable subject, or specimen to watch. If the audience have found a consumable niche in the aesthetic, then the audience also do not see the poor as people. Yes, even if they are poor themselves. Subverting what Stero says in her essay in defense of the poor image, it is about defiance and appropriation just as it is about conformism and exploitation. Truly, the simulacra of poverty in this genre of work, unlike reality as she's referring to in the essay, serves only to defy existing norms in the art world by deliberately being unglamorous and in effect exploiting the real-life community that it imitates. This parody of being lower class lacks the dimensions and nuances that real people have. It's partly why the aesthetic is so easily reproduced. Images can be copied repeatedly until the internet ceases to exist, but reality, the events that make our reality, can't. At the end of the day, even when scenes are immortalized by documentary photography, like in Mickiewicz's Happy Club, the working class still suffer the fate of dehumanization, because spotlighting is also othering. Here is where I'll introduce the main criticism that I've reflected on when engaging with art like this, and the accompanying research that I found that backs up this claim. I'll read this excerpt from Bell Hooks's Black Looks, Race and Representation, Chapter 24, the infamous Eating the Other. Certainly, from the standpoint of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, the hope is that desires for the primitive, or fantasies about the other, can be continually exploited, and that such exploitation will occur in a manner that reinscribes and maintains the status quo. Othering is a prevalent issue outside of the photography and videography scene that damages the relationships we have with communities we aren't involved with by enforcing the idea that some people, in this case Jaywikians especially, are primitive and alien, and positions the viewer to assume that they hold the mainstream and civilized perspective in this exchange. Well, not that this interaction is much of an exchange because the subject gets nothing in return. Instead, an unfair dynamic is created that emboldens people to continually exploit the narrative that they hold about working class people and its subsequent reimaginings for their own consumption, and thus enable the government's lack of support given to the community. After all, if any of the promised regeneration and development was to actually go forth in Jaywick, where would artists use as their canvas? What would the audience tune into? The Jaywick Sands Happy Club was created in 2015 by Danny Sloggett, a lifelong resident of the area. In 2016, for unknown reasons, Sandra Mickiewicz was invited to document the members' day-to-day activities, cementing the establishment of the said club, according to her own descriptions of the work on the website, that is. I tried to reach out myself, but to no avail. It's important to note that she says she gained the trust of the community on Lens Culture, where I first saw the work, but I'll elaborate on this later. Now, Mickiewicz was not the first to ever publicize the livelihood and survival of Jaywickians. Channel 5 already had their fair share of that, in 2015 as well, with Benefits by the Sea. But she may have been the first to document or photograph the Happy Club, which was set up 3 months after the Channel 5 series release. Since then, there are two other known photographers who have been commended for also documenting their time spent with the JSHC, David J. Shaw and Lawrence Corley. Likely unrelated, but on YouTube there are also many videos supposedly documenting life in Jaywick since 2015, with the most recent example of virality I can say that I've personally watched being Canaan's or Real Life is Wild's Jaywick documentary, which was released in late 2024. Whilst it doesn't explicitly mention the Happy Club, it did give a lot more publicity and coverage to the life of Danny Sloggett. Whilst not the fault of the artists themselves, most of the third-person coverage about this work is incredibly dehumanizing in my opinion, affirming what I said earlier. The work always ends up being exploitative. For example, an account called Photo Northwest on Instagram said this about Shaw's work. Focusing on a community often reduced to headlines, the work presents a more nuanced and human portrayal of life in Jaywick. Through close collaboration with residents, David captures a powerful sense of care, resilience, and connection that exists beyond stereotypes. Doesn't this confirm that the art world already holds the belief that poor people aren't human? What about an article on It's Nice That, a website? Sandra Mickiewicz captures the surprising beauty of Jaywick. Why is it so surprising? It's clear to see why Mickiewicz would have had to gain the trust of the community in the town, as there are many direct quotes from residents in all the supplementary information about these examples, where people express being wary of visitors with cameras as they are tired of being exploited for television or social media content. Digital publicization like this works against real people because of its permeance. The content remains the same even though the social attitudes change over the years. People like me can appropriate content and continually talk about moments that no longer reflect the reality of that person at the expense of their image. And social media conversations can overrun facts about the subject being discussed. Where we, the audience, interact with the Happy Club online rather than in person, I argue that we have created a dual-dimensional version of it, one that serves a purpose to Jaywick and one that serves a purpose to us. One that does, and one that is done to, perhaps. I wonder on the effects of the lifespan of these works and how our encounter with it online affects the people involved with its creation on the flip side. This question has been debated at length regarding pornography, which I made explicit reference to in the title, but haven't yet addressed. Oops. I'll do that now. According to Wikipedia, poverty porn has been defined as any type of media, be it written, photographed, or filmed, which exploits the poor person's condition in order to generate the necessary sympathy for sales. Paraphrased. It also suggests that the viewer of the exploited protagonist is motivated by gratification, a term of criticism applied to media that objectifies poverty for the sake of entertaining a privileged audience. The comparison to pornography with this term comes from the invasive and self-gratifying nature of the content's purpose and production, and, as well, how repeated consumption of it has been linked to distorted worldviews. Pornography plays in shaping people's sexual expectations and perceptions of partners, as a UK government study explains. We aren't just passively consuming the images and themes in the content, we are scripting the behavior like it is applicable to real life scenarios and making direct links internally with things that we would consider symbols in the content. You know what people think of when they see someone stuck in a tight space by the hips, with one side displaying the front and the other displaying their behind. Porn having this impact on our reality is why the phrase exists. Likewise with pornography, we must assess whether or not our desire to see what's private and overall to bastardize it is coming from a place of power. It is us maintaining a belief that the other, in this case the poor, have nothing in common with us. Their livelihood exists to please us. Their pleasure is ours too, and thus we strip them of agency. Have you ever considered whether the people are comfortable being defined as they are in the images? Similarly, do we ever ask if the porn star is experiencing real pleasure? Suddenly, when a camera is involved, their consent and enjoyment becomes irrelevant to us. The psychological framing in the works, like in porn, tries to make you feel involved with their lifestyle, either through nostalgic or instinctive familiarity. It's like how with mainstream porn, it's filmed in a way that makes you feel like you're an active participant in the fucking. Or at least in the room, closely watching it. It's the familiarity with the camera movements that follow the pattern of the way people's eyes move. It's the angle that the camera is held, and the camera used. I mean, why does this type of work tend to be filmed with a neo-realist, amateur, home-style aesthetic? It's because the lack of professionalism positions us to think of it as familiar, too. The fetishization of being poor in the countryside, in fact, has caused a spiking resurgence in film photography and 8mm video within certain online communities, with people now falsely attributing the otherwise pompous behavior of imitation to humility due to the constant associations with nostalgia and poverty porn. Maintaining vintage technology like film is actually quite expensive, I would know. But this is how the media you consume can shape your worldview. It's media conditioning and a distortion of how people are known to be poor, which can also have adverse consequences. Currently, my work is the same. Well, I'm just unoriginal. I'm an emerging artist who wanted to explore the fetishization and corruption of being a working class adult in Britain in a very on the nose manner on purpose. In a way, my work is rather existential, acknowledging itself as obscene and quixotic, aware of being an anthology of faked scenes that look uncanny with a sense of faux nostalgia and cinematic composition. But I am also not free of criticism. Yes, this was my intention, but I also admit that my attraction to this concept was because I'm an avid consumer of poverty porn. A self-crucifying masturbation addict, if you will. A contemplative gooner. And worse, my barely disguised fetish bleeds into my art, which I claim is how I rationalize my understanding of the world. Have I basically told everyone that I understand the world through the lens of fetish material? Even though I use models rather than real subjects to avoid exposing real people's stories and imagine scenes rather than stalking people for 48 hours trying to catch the perfect moment, my portrayal of working class people in my work, as it stands, is still alienating, voyeuristic, and romanticized. Well, pretending I, or any of us, will take this as an incentive to become change makers in the art world is wishful thinking. I knew this even before writing this video essay. I'm sure there have been other theories on the topic too, but acknowledging the flaws in our behavior is the first step. I offer no conclusion here, just awareness, and an ironically pretty picture.